Have you ever wondered what could happen if the very thing that was dismissed as a mere temporary solution turned out to be the one thing that kept everyone alive? In the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, something as simple as a makeshift mask became the key to survival. And yet, in the beginning, it was ridiculed, mocked by experts, and dismissed as impractical. How could something so simple make such a difference? When the crisis first hit, no one could have foreseen the consequences. People were scrambling for answers, but most of them came from conventional thinking. Masks were considered a basic, temporary fix, something that wouldn't last under real pressure. And yet, in a world where technology and preparation had failed, this humble, improvised solution was about to become their lifeline. Imagine a room full of experts, all with the best resources at their disposal, all working on strategies that were meant to protect and preserve lives. They laughed when the idea of using a makeshift mask was first proposed. It wasn't sophisticated, it wasn't hype, but it was something the team could make with the materials at hand and in a world suddenly stripped of everything. That was the one thing they had left: resourcefulness. At first, it seemed laughable. The mask was a simple thing, a patchwork of whatever materials they could find: cloth, rubber, old filters. No one thought it would stand the test of time or the deadly circumstances they were about to face. But sometimes the most unexpected solutions are the ones that change everything. The masque didn't just protect from the immediate danger. It became a symbol of how something so basic could be the difference between life and death. Every person who wore it had a chance to survive longer, to endure what others couldn't. And while others mocked the simplicity of it, it was the only thing that proved effective when the world was falling apart. Stay with us, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about survival. When the idea of using a makeshift mask was first introduced, it was met with nothing short of ridicule. "This won't work," they said. "You need proper equipment, not something you cobble together in desperation." But sometimes, in the heat of the moment, desperation breeds the most unexpected breakthroughs. The team had been looking for answers in all the wrong places, relying on tried and true methods and relying on technology that had failed them when it mattered most. And yet, amid the chaos, a lone inventor stood with a simple idea. What if they could make something from what was readily available? Something basic but effective. The naysayers didn't hold back their laughter. They ridiculed the suggestion, calling it a patchwork solution. How could a simple mask possibly protect against the dangers that awaited them? It was a classic case of what happens when innovation goes against tradition. The established experts, with all their training and knowledge, couldn't see the value in something so rudimentary. They were blinded by their preconceived notions of what would work, and the simple truth was that sometimes the simplest solutions were the ones most needed. But that's where things took a dramatic turn. With time running out and no other options left, they turned to the very thing that had been laughed off. It was the mask. It was small, unremarkable, and, at first glance, unworthy of serious consideration. Yet it became the one thing that saved them all. By the time the rest of the team realized the potential of this humble creation, it was already making a difference quietly, but undeniably. The mask wasn't just saving lives. It was proving all those who mocked it wrong. What was dismissed as a joke had now become their only hope, and the real story was just beginning. In the midst of the chaos, the hero of this story wasn't someone with a grand title or a wealth of experience. Instead, it was an ordinary person, someone overlooked and dismissed by the very same experts who had mocked the mask. But what they didn't realize was that the hero was never about credentials. It was about a relentless drive to survive, to innovate, and to push forward when everyone else had given up. This unlikely inventor, let's call them the reluctant hero, had no grand plans of saving the world. In fact, they hadn't even intended for their creation to become the lifeline it turned out to be. Their sole focus was finding something that could make a difference in a situation where everything seemed hopeless. They weren't an engineer or a scientist. They were just a person who saw a problem and decided to do something about it. The idea came during a quiet moment of desperation. Everyone had their heads buried in manuals and high-tech solutions that were falling short, while others were debating complex methods and solutions that weren't working. The reluctant hero simply took a step back and asked, "What do we have? What can we make work with what we already have?" Using basic materials and an almost childlike creativity, the hero designed a simple mask, a piece of cloth, rubber, and a few scraps from old equipment. Nothing about it screamed life-saving innovation, and yet it was. The hero had figured out something that no one else had even considered: the power of simplicity in times of crisis. The moment the mask was put to the test, there was a quiet pause and unspoken realization that perhaps, just perhaps, this unassuming invention might just be the solution they had been searching for. The rest of the team, initially dismissive, began to watch in awe as the mask became the most reliable protection they had. But what made this story even more incredible was how this reluctant hero never sought recognition or praise for their creation. They simply did what was necessary and moved on. They didn't want fame or accolades. They didn't care about proving others wrong. Their only concern was that they had done something to make sure everyone had a fighting chance. The mask, born from a moment of quiet ingenuity, had proven to be the one thing that no one else had thought to try it. It was saving lives when nothing else could. Now that you're hooked, let me know what you think so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this story. Your support helps us keep bringing these incredible, untold tales to life. Shall we continue with the next section? Let me know. It wasn't until the unthinkable happened that the mask's true value became undeniable. The team had been struggling for days, each new challenge adding more weight to the crushing reality of their situation. Traditional methods had failed them, and hope was beginning to slip away. In the midst of all this, the mask that everyone had once ridiculed became the only option left. With every other resource exhausted, every other plan either failing or too complex to implement in time, the simple makeshift mask became the team's last resort. The moment of truth arrived swiftly. Would they continue to rely on flawed strategies and technology, or would they finally give in and trust in what had initially been mocked? As the crisis escalated, the team realized that this wasn't about fancy equipment or cutting-edge technology. It wasn't about the next big idea. It was about survival. And in that moment, the mask was all they had. The heroes of the day weren't the scientists or the experts. They were the ones who had the foresight to embrace the simplest, most overlooked solution. At first, everyone was still uncertain. Even as they donned the masks, there was doubt. Could this really work? Was it too late? But as the team went into action, something remarkable began to happen. The mask, which had been mocked and dismissed, started proving its worth. It became their shield, proving to be more effective than any other method they had tried. This wasn't just about protection from an immediate threat. The mask, in its simplicity, became something bigger, a symbol of innovation born out of necessity. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't high-tech, but it was exactly what they needed when nothing else worked. And just like that, the team's reliance on the mask became inevitable. At this moment, there was no more time for doubts. only results. The mask was the last hope. It worked. And it worked not because it was perfect, but because it was simple, enough to survive in an imperfect world. The mask, lifted only days before, had become their lifeline, the only option that stood between them and disaster. It was a perfect example of how sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. As the days passed, the simple makeshift mask began to prove its worth, not just as a last resort, but as the key to survival. The team, initially skeptical, started to realize just how essential it had become. It wasn't just a piece of fabricus. Mask became the symbol of their resilience. Every person who wore it could breathe a little easier, knowing that despite the chaos surrounding them, they had a fighting chance. The real breakthrough came when it became clear that the mask wasn't just providing physical protection, it was also a mental shield. The team members felt a sense of relief each time they put it on, knowing they were taking action in the only way they could, in a situation where so much was beyond their control. The mask was one of the few things they could control, and that sense of agency made all the difference. But the true impact of the mask wasn't just in how it protected the individuals who wore it. It became something more, something that united the group in a shared struggle. It was a communal object now, passed around, altered, and improved upon as the team worked together to make it even better. Each person who wore it became part of something larger than themselves, a team that come together against all odds. As the days wore on, it became evident that the mask was the one consistent factor keeping everyone alive. It was the piece of ingenuity that worked when nothing else did. Where technology had faltered, the mask had succeeded. And the more they relied on it, the more the team realized that sometimes the simplest ideas were the ones that made the greatest difference. But while the mask was keeping them alive, the danger wasn't over. There was still uncertainty about how much longer they could hold out. The mask might have been a small thing, but it was their last hope, and as long as they had it, they held on to the possibility of survival. At this point, the team's survival was no longer just about using the mask correctly. It was about trusting it and trusting each other. And as each passing day proved the mask's worth, the idea of ever being without it seemed unthinkable. As the team's reliance on the mask grew, it became evident that the true test of their survival would not just be about the mask, but about how they would face the enemy in times of crisis. It's often the unassuming objects that end up holding the line when nothing else can. The mask, once mocked and underestimated, now stood as the only thing between the team and total destruction. The situation had grown increasingly dire. The enemy, relentless and merciless, was closing in on them. Yet, the mask became the team's unspoken weapon, the tool that allowed them to fight back. It wasn't just about surviving the physical threat, it was about having the strength to face what was coming, to hold on to the belief that they could make it through. And the mask was at the center of that belief. As the team engaged with the enemy, the mask proved to be more than just a shield. Against the obvious dangers, it became a symbol of their resilience. Every time they faced a new challenge, the mask was there, silently doing its job. It kept them protected, it kept them breathing, and it kept their hope alive. But the enemy wasn't just a physical threat. They were a psychological one too. They knew the fear they instilled in their targets, the terror that spread as soon as they made their presence known. And yet, in the face of this terror, the mask allowed the team to stand firm. It became their courage in physical form. With every new encounter, it became clear that the mask wasn't just helping them survive, it was empowering them to fight back. As they pressed forward, more confident than before, the team began to see that the true strength of the mask lay not just in its function, but in the hope it provided. When everything else seemed impossible, this simple object was the one thing that kept them from giving in. The more they fought, the more they realized that it wasn't the mask that was keeping them alive. It was their newfound belief in each other and in the power of doing what seemed impossible. They were no longer just surviving, they were becoming a force to be reckoned with. Now, as the battle continued to rage, they couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could they hold out? The mask, for all its simplicity, had given them the strength to go this far. But would it be enough? What no one had expected was that the mask would serve a purpose far beyond its intended protection. In the midst of battle, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death, the mask wasn't just a shield, it became part of a larger, more intricate strategy. While the team initially relied on it for survival, they soon discovered that it offered them something even more valuable, a tactical advantage. The enemy, despite their overwhelming numbers and firepower, had one glaring weakness. They underestimated the very thing that was keeping the team alive. While the team was using the mask for basic survival, they were also unknowingly using it as a decoy. The simplicity of the mask was its genius. In a world of high-tech weaponry and sophisticated strategies, it stood out as a stark contrast to a basic, unassuming object that the enemy never saw coming. This unexpected advantage allowed the team to confuse and disorient their attackers. While the enemy concentrated their efforts on what they perceived as the biggest threats, the mask gave the team the opportunity to move undetected, to outmaneuver their pursuers, and to gain the upper hand. Every time the enemy thought they had the upper hand, the team's reliance on the mask allowed them to regroup, rethink, and strike back with new tactics. But it wasn't just about deception. The mask also became a tool for psychological warfare. The enemy had expected the team to collapse under pressure, to give up when things got tough. What they didn't count on was the resilience and resourcefulness that the mask had inspired. The team, once on the brink of defeat, now had a renewed sense of hope and determination. Every time they put the mask on, they were reminded that they had a chance, that they could still fight. In the heat of battle, when every second counted, the mask became a symbol of quick thinking, of adaptability. It allowed the team to make bold decisions, to take risks that would have been unimaginable without it. And in the end, it became clear the mask wasn't just about survival, it was about strategy. It was about thinking outside the box, about using what you have in ways no one else would think to use it. Now that the team had turned the tide, the mask had become an integral part of their tactical approach. It wasn't just something to wear, it was something to use, to manipulate, to adapt. And every time they did, they gained a small advantage that brought them closer to victory. The tide of battle had shifted, but the real turning point came when the team fully embraced the fact that the mask was not just an improvised solution, but the game changer they had been waiting for. It was no longer just about surviving, it was about winning. The team had learned to adapt, to trust in their ingenuity, and now they faced the ultimate test. Could their innovation turn the tide in their favor once and for all? As the situation grew increasingly dire and the enemy pressed in from all sides, the team realized something profound. It wasn't just the mask that kept them alive, it was the mindset that came with it. The confidence in something so simple, so unexpected, had unlocked a new level of creativity and resolve. Where others saw only obstacles, they began to see opportunities, and this new perspective was exactly what they needed to break through. What had once been a makeshift solution had now become the centerpiece of their strategy. As they continued to adapt, improve, and evolve, they discovered that their success was no longer about the odds stacked against them, but about how they used their limited resources to outthink and outlast their opponents. The breakthrough came in a seemingly small, almost unnoticed moment. A decision was made. A new tactic was tried. And for the first time, they realized they could not just survive, they could dominate. The mask, once dismissed, had now proven that innovation, no matter how humble, could be the ultimate weapon. As the team executed their newfound strategy, it was clear that the mask had done more than protect, it had inspired. Every victory, no matter how small, built on the momentum of that initial moment when they chose to trust something unexpected. The mask had proven that sometimes the best way to win wasn't through sheer force, but through clever adaptation. What do you think about how the mask became a turning point in the battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We have more twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. When the battle finally came to an end, the team stood victorious, though they had endured far more than anyone could have anticipated. What had started as a desperate attempt to survive had turned into a brilliant display of resilience, resourcefulness, and sheer willpower. The mask, once dismissed as a temporary fix, had become the key to their success. But the true impact of the mask wasn't just seen in the aftermath of the battle, it was in the shift that it created within the team. The moment they fully embraced it, the team's mindset changed. The mask was no longer just a tool. It had become a symbol of innovation, of how necessity can drive incredible ingenuity. It was proof that even in the darkest times, there's always room for creativity and adaptation. Looking back, it was clear that the mask had provided the team with much more than protection. It had given them the confidence to take risks, to push past their fears, and to outsmart their enemies. In every battle that followed, they remembered that first moment of doubt when they put the mask on. And each time it reminded them that sometimes the most unassuming solutions are the ones that change everything. The victory was not just a physical one, it was a mental one as well. The team had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the power of simple ideas. In a world filled with complexity, sometimes the solution lies in the simplest thing. The mask had proven this in the most dramatic way. Now, as the dust settled and the team moved forward, the mask remained a symbol of their triumph. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about how their creativity had reshaped their future. It wasn't just a piece of cloth, it was a reminder that innovation, no matter how humble, can change the world. As time went on, the legend of the makeshift mask continued to grow. What began as a simple, overlooked object had transformed into a powerful symbol, one that represented not just survival, but the power of human ingenuity and determination. Its legacy wasn't just about its physical function. It was about what it had inspired in those who used it. It had shown that when faced with the impossible, sometimes the simplest solutions are the most profound. Years later, long after the battle had ended, the mask still held significance. It had become more than a protective tool, it had become a symbol of resilience, a reminder that no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always hope, always a way forward, and always the possibility of a solution, even if it came in the most unexpected form. People who had been a part of that experience would forever carry with them the knowledge that sometimes the world's greatest innovations come from the unlikeliest of places. The mask, once mocked and dismissed, had changed everything for them. And while it was never meant to be a permanent solution, it had proven that in moments of crisis, sometimes the simplest ideas are the most powerful. As the years passed, the story of the mask was passed down, shared with new generations who marveled at how something so basic could have been the difference between life and death. The mask became more than just an object. It was a testament to the power of innovation, of creativity, and of the human spirit. It was a story that would live on long after the war had ended, a reminder that survival often depends not on what we have, but on how we choose to use what we're given. For those who had survived, the legacy of the mask was a lasting reminder that no challenge was insurmountable if they worked together, stayed resourceful, and never stopped believing in the power of their own ingenuity. As the credits roll, remember this: it's not always the big, flashy innovations that change the world. Sometimes it's the small, simple ideas that make all the difference. If you stayed with us until the end, thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment with something inspiring from your own life. Drop a like to support more stories like this, and subscribe if you want to hear more unbelievable stories of survival, innovation, and the power of the human spirit.